What if I told you that the most misunderstood book in the Bible holds the secret to humanity's deepest longing? Most people skip Leviticus. They see ancient rituals, strange rules about skin diseases, and endless animal sacrifices. But hidden beneath these ceremonies lies something revolutionary, a roadmap for broken humanity to live in the presence of a holy God. Picture this. You're standing outside a tent glowing with divine fire. Inside, the creator of the universe dwells among former slaves. But there's a problem. How can imperfect humans coexist with perfect holiness without being consumed? One wrong move, and you're dead. Do priests already learn this the hard way? This isn't just about old laws. It's about blood that speaks, time that heals, and a God who designs elaborate systems not to keep people away, but to bring them close. Every drop of blood, every grain offering, every seventh year whispers the same promise: reconciliation is possible. Leviticus answers the question every human heart asks: how do I approach the divine? The answer will surprise you. This isn't religion, it's rescue. Welcome to Leviticus like you've never seen before. The book begins with a voice calling from inside a tent. God had just filled the tabernacle with his glory at the end of Exodus, and now he speaks to Moses from within that sacred space. Chapter 1, verse 1 tells us, "The Lord called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting." What comes next isn't a command to obey or a threat to fear. It's an invitation to worship. God explains how anyone who wants to bring an offering can approach him. The first offering he describes is called the burnt offering, and it's special because everything gets consumed by fire. Nothing is held back. In verse 2, God says, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when anyone among you brings an offering to the Lord, bring as your offering an animal from either the herd or the flock." Notice the word anyone. This isn't just for priests or leaders. Every person has access to God through this system. If someone brings cattle, it must be a male without any defects. Verse 3 explains, if the offering is a burnt offering from the herd, you are to offer a male without defect. You must present it at the entrance to the tent of meeting so that it will be acceptable to the Lord. The animal has to be perfect because it represents the worshiper approaching a perfect God. The person bringing the offering does something significant. Verse 4 says, "You are to lay your hand on the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted on your behalf to make atonement for you." This hand-laying isn't casual, it's a transfer. The worshipper identifies with the animal, and the animal becomes a substitute. Then comes the blood. Verse 5 describes what happens next. You are to slaughter the young bull before the Lord, and then Aaron's sons, the priests, shall bring the blood and splash it against the sides of the altar at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Blood represents life, and life is being given to cover sin. The priests take over from here. The worshipper skins the animal and cuts it into pieces. Verse 6 tells us you are to skin the burnt offering and cut it into pieces. The priests arrange everything on the altar, including the head and the fat. Verses 8 and 9 say, "Then Aaron's sons, the priests, shall arrange the pieces, including the head and the fat, on the wood that is burning on the altar. You are to wash the internal organs and the legs with water, and the priest is to burn all of it on the altar. It is a burnt offering, a food offering, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. The smoke rises toward heaven. Everything burns, nothing remains. This complete consumption symbolizes total dedication to God. Not everyone can afford a bull. God knows this, so he provides alternatives. Verse 10 says, "If the offering is a burnt offering from the flock, from either the sheep or the goats, you are to offer a male without defect." The process is the same: hand-laying, slaughter, blood splashed on the altar, and complete burning. For the poorest worshippers, even smaller provisions exist. Verse 14 states, "If the offering to the Lord is a burnt offering of birds, you are to offer a dove or a young pigeon." The priest handles the entire process for birds. Verse 15 describes, The priest shall bring it to the altar, wring off the head, and burn it on the altar. Its blood shall be drained out on the side of the altar. God doesn't demand what people cannot give, but whatever they bring must be given completely. The burnt offering teaches that worship costs something, and true devotion holds nothing back. Not every offering requires an animal's death. Chapter 2 introduces something different, an offering made from the work of human hands. This is the grain offering, and it comes from the fields and the kitchen. Verse 1 begins, "When anyone brings a grain offering to the Lord, their offering is to be of the finest flour. They are to pour olive oil on it, put incense on it." Fine flour means quality. It's been sifted and refined, representing the best of what someone has worked to produce. The worshipper brings this flour to the priests. Verse 2 continues, "And take it to Aaron's sons, the priests. The priest shall take a handful of the flour and oil, together with all the incense, and burn this as a memorial portion on the altar, a food offering, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. Only a portion burns. The rest becomes food for the priests, showing that worship sustains those who serve at the altar." Grain offerings can also be baked. Verse 4 offers options. If you bring a grain offering baked in an oven, it is to consist of the finest flour, either thick loaves made without yeast and with olive oil mixed in, or thin loaves made without yeast and brushed with olive oil. Whether cooked on a griddle or in a pan, the principle stays the same. Unleavened bread mixed with oil, given to God. Why no yeast? Verse 11 explains, "Every grain offering you bring to the Lord must be made without yeast, for you are not to burn any yeast or honey in a food offering presented to the Lord." Yeast causes fermentation, a form of corruption. These offerings must be pure and simple, but something must be added. Verse 13 is clear. "Season all your grain offerings with salt. Do not leave the salt of the covenant of your God out of your grain offerings. Add salt to all your offerings." Salt preserves and purifies. It represents the lasting nature of the covenant between God and His people. The grain offering teaches that God values ordinary work. The bread on your table and the oil in your lamp can become acts of worship. Nothing in life exists outside God's concern. Chapter 3 introduces an offering with a different purpose. It's called the fellowship offering or peace offering, and unlike the burnt offering, this one gets shared. Verse 1 starts, "If your offering is a fellowship offering, and you offer an animal from the herd, whether male or female, you are to present before the Lord an animal without defect." The peace offering allows both male and female animals. It's more flexible than the burnt offering. The process begins the same way. Verse 2 says, "You are to lay your hand on the head of your offering and slaughter it at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Then Aaron's sons, the priests, shall splash the blood against the sides of the altar on all sides." The hand-laying and blood ritual remain essential. But here's the difference. Not everything burns. Verse 3 explains, "From the fellowship offering, you are to bring a food offering to the Lord, the internal organs and all the fat that is connected to them." God receives the fat, the richest, most desirable part. Why does God want the fat? Because it's the best. Giving God the best honors Him. The priests burn these portions on the altar, and verse 5 says it's a food offering, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. Then comes a permanent command. Verse 17 states, "This is a lasting ordinance for the generations to come, wherever you live. You must not eat any fat or any blood." Fat and blood are reserved for sacred purposes. The peace offering celebrates something. It marks thanksgiving, the fulfillment of vows, or simply the joy of fellowship with God. After God receives His portion and the priests receive theirs, the worshipper takes the rest home to eat with family and friends. This shared meal transforms worship into celebration. God isn't distant, He's at the table. Chapter 4 shifts to a harder reality. People sin even when they don't mean to. Unintentional sins still create separation from a holy God, and something must be done about them. Verse 2 lays out the scenario. Say to the Israelites, when anyone sins unintentionally and does what is forbidden in any of the Lord's commands. These aren't deliberate rebellions. These are mistakes, accidents, failures of understanding, but they still matter. The first case involves the high priest. Verse 3 says, if the anointed priest sins, bringing guilt on the people, he must bring to the Lord a young bull without defect as a sin offering for the sin he has committed. When the high priest sins, it affects everyone. His offering must be significant, a young bull. The priest lays his hand on the bull's head and slaughters it before the Lord. Then something unique happens. Verse 5 explains, then the anointed priest shall take some of the bull's blood and carry it into the tent of meeting. The priest takes blood inside the tabernacle, something that doesn't happen with other offerings. Verse 6 continues, he is to dip his finger into the blood and sprinkle some of it 7 times before the Lord in front of the curtain of the sanctuary. 7 times, the number of completion. Blood reaches toward the most holy place where God's presence dwells most intensely. More blood goes on the horns of the incense altar inside the tabernacle. Verse 7 says, the priest shall then put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of fragrant incense that is before the Lord in the tent of meeting. The rest of the bull's blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offering at the entrance to the tent of meeting. The fat burns on the altar, just like in the peace offering, but the rest of the bull goes outside the camp. Verses 11 and 12 describe, but the hide of the bull and all its flesh, as well as the head and legs, the internal organs and the intestines, that is, all the rest of the bull, he must take outside the camp to a place ceremonially clean, where the ashes are thrown, and burn it there in a wood fire on the ash heap. What if the entire community sins unintentionally? Verse 13 addresses this. If the whole Israelite community sins unintentionally and does what is forbidden in any of the Lord's commands, even though the community is unaware of the matter, when they realize their guilt. Corporate sin requires corporate atonement. The elders lay their hands on a bull before the Lord, and it's slaughtered. Verse 16 says, then the anointed priest is to take some of the bull's blood into the tent of meeting. The same blood ritual follows. Leaders get special attention too. Verse 22 states, when a leader sins unintentionally and does what is forbidden in any of the commands of the Lord, his God, when he realizes his guilt. A leader brings a male goat without defect. The process is simpler. No blood inside the tabernacle, but blood still goes on the horns of the burnt offering altar outside. For ordinary individuals, the requirement adjusts. Verse 27 says, if any member of the community sins unintentionally and does what is forbidden in any of the Lord's commands, when they realize their guilt, they bring a female goat or lamb. Verse 29 explains, they are to lay their hand on the head of the sin offering and slaughter it at the place of the burnt offering. The priest takes blood on his finger and puts it on the horns of the altar. All the fat burns, and verse 31 ends with a promise. In this way the priest will make atonement for them, and they will be forgiven. Chapter 5 continues with specific situations. Verse 1 mentions someone who knows information about a crime but doesn't speak up. Verse 2 talks about touching something unclean. Verse 4 discusses rash oaths. All these require sin offerings. But what about those who can't afford a lamb? God provides options. Verse 7 says, anyone who cannot afford a lamb is to bring 2 doves or 2 young pigeons to the Lord as a penalty for their sin, one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. For the poorest of the poor, even birds might be too expensive. Verse 11 shows God's heart. If, however, they cannot afford 2 doves or 2 young pigeons, they are to bring as an offering for their sin 1/10 of an ephah of the finest flour for a sin offering. No blood this time, just flour. Even the poorest person can find forgiveness. God makes a way for everyone. Some sins do more than break fellowship with God. They cause actual damage to God's property or to other people. For these, the guilt offering provides both atonement and restitution. Chapter 5, verse 15 specifies the first scenario. When anyone is unfaithful to the Lord by sinning unintentionally in regard to any of the Lord's holy things, they are to bring to the Lord as a penalty a ram from the flock, one without defect and of the proper value in silver according to the sanctuary shekel. It is a guilt offering. Holy things means items dedicated to God, portions of sacrifices, tithes, offerings. If someone accidentally uses or consumes what belongs to God, they must make it right. Verse 16 says, they must make restitution for what they have failed to do in regard to the holy things, pay an additional penalty of 1/5 of its value, and give it all to the priest. Notice the 20% addition. Full repayment isn't enough. The extra 1/5 acknowledges the wrong and demonstrates sincerity. Only after restitution can the ram be sacrificed for atonement. Chapter 6 addresses sins against other people. Verse 2 describes the scenarios. If anyone sins and is unfaithful to the Lord by deceiving a neighbor about something entrusted to them or left in their care, or about something stolen, or if they cheat their neighbor, but notice what must happen first. Verses 4 and 5 say, when they sin in any of these ways and realize their guilt, they must return what they have stolen or taken by extortion, or what was entrusted to them, or the lost property they found, or whatever it was they swore falsely about. They must make restitution in full, add 1/5 of the value to it, and give it all to the owner on the day they present their guilt offering. Horizontal reconciliation precedes vertical reconciliation. Make things right with the person you wronged before approaching God. Return what you took, add 20%, and hand it over. Then bring the ram to the priest. Verse 7 concludes, in this way, the priest will make atonement for them before the Lord, and they will be forgiven for any of the things they did that made them guilty. The guilt offering teaches that forgiveness isn't cheap, and faith affects behavior. You can't truly repent while keeping stolen goods. Real change involves real cost. The perspective now shifts. Chapters 1 through 5 explained offerings from the worshipper's viewpoint. Chapters 6 and 7 repeat these offerings from the priest's perspective. How should they handle these sacred duties? Chapter 6, verse 9, gives the first instruction about the burnt offering. Give Aaron and his sons this command. These are the regulations for the burnt offering. The burnt offering is to remain on the altar hearth throughout the night till morning, and the fire must be kept burning on the altar. The fire never goes out. Every morning the priest must dress in his linen clothes and remove the ashes. Verse 12 emphasizes, the fire on the altar must be kept burning. It must not go out. Every morning the priest is to add firewood and arrange the burnt offering on it and burn the fat of the fellowship offerings on it. The continual fire symbolizes worship that never stops. The grain offering comes next. Verse 16 explains what happens to the rest after the memorial portion burns. Aaron and his sons shall eat the rest of it, but it is to be eaten without yeast in the sanctuary area. They are to eat it in the courtyard of the tent of meeting. This is food for the priests, but it's holy food. Verse 18 specifies any male descendant of Aaron may eat it. For all generations to come, it is his perpetual share of the food offerings presented to the Lord. Whatever touches them will become holy. The sin offering receives detailed instructions. Verse 25 states, say to Aaron and his sons, these are the regulations for the sin offering. The sin offering is to be slaughtered before the Lord in the place the burnt offering is slaughtered. It is most holy. The priest who offers it eats it, but only in a holy place. Verse 27 warns, whatever touches any of the flesh will become holy, and if any of the blood is spattered on a garment, you must wash it in the sanctuary area. But remember, when a sin offering's blood enters the tabernacle, the meat cannot be eaten. Verse 30 states, "But any sin offering whose blood is brought into the tent of meeting to make atonement in the holy place must not be eaten. It must be burned up." Chapter 7 continues with the guilt offering. Verse 1 says, "These are the regulations for the guilt offering, which is most holy." Verse 7 explains, "The same law applies to both the sin offering and the guilt offering. They belong to the priest who makes atonement with them." Fellowship offerings have more complex rules because different types exist. Verse 15 states, "The meat of their fellowship offering of thanksgiving must be eaten on the day it is offered. They must leave none of it till morning." Vow offerings and free will offerings have different timing. Verse 16 says, "If, however, their offering is the result of a vow or is a free will offering, the sacrifice shall be eaten on the day they offer it, but anything left over may be eaten on the next day." Why? Verse 18 explains, "If any meat of the fellowship offering is eaten on the third day, the one who offered it will not be accepted. It will not be reckoned to them, for it has become impure. The person who eats any of it will be held responsible." Two things are permanently forbidden. Verse 23 says, "Say to the Israelites, do not eat any of the fat of cattle, sheep, or goats." Verse 26 adds, "And wherever you live, you must not eat the blood of any bird or animal." Every detail has a purpose. Every rule protects holiness. The priests don't just perform rituals. They maintain the system that allows sinful people to approach a holy God. Theory becomes practice. God has explained how offerings work. Now it's time to ordain the men who will perform them. Chapter 8 records the consecration of Aaron and his sons. Verse 2 lists what's needed. "Bring Aaron and his sons their garments, the anointing oil, the bull for the sin offering, the 2 rams, and the basket containing bread made without yeast." Verse 3 adds, "And gather the entire assembly at the entrance to the tent of meeting." Moses obeys exactly. The whole community watches. This isn't a private ceremony. Moses brings Aaron and his sons forward and washes them with water. Next comes the clothing. Verse 7 describes the process. "He put the tunic on Aaron, tied the sash around him, clothed him with the robe, and put the ephod on him." Each garment has meaning. Moses then anoints everything. Verse 10 says, "Then Moses took the anointing oil and anointed the tabernacle and everything in it, and so consecrated them." The furniture, the altar, the basin, oil touches it all. Verse 12 focuses on Aaron. "He poured some of the anointing oil on Aaron's head and anointed him to consecrate him." Now the offerings begin. First, the sin offering. Verse 14 explains, "He then presented the bull for the sin offering, and Aaron and his sons laid their hands on its head." Even priests need atonement before they can serve. The burnt offering follows. Verse 18 says, "He then presented the ram for the burnt offering, and Aaron and his sons laid their hands on its head." The second ram is different. This is the ram of ordination. Moses slaughters it, but then something unusual happens. Verses 23 and 24 describe it. "Moses slaughtered the ram and took some of its blood and put it on the lobe of Aaron's right ear, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot." Moses also brought Aaron's sons forward and put some of the blood on the lobes of their right ears, on the thumbs of their right hands, and on the big toes of their right feet. Blood on the ear, thumb, and toe. Why? Because priests must hear God's word, work with their hands in service, and walk in his ways. Here comes the key instruction. Verse 33 explains, "Do not leave the entrance to the tent of meeting for 7 days, until the days of your ordination are completed, for your ordination will last 7 days. 7 full days. They cannot leave." Verse 36 concludes simply, "So Aaron and his sons did everything the Lord commanded through Moses." They obeyed completely. 7 days of preparation for a lifetime of service. 7 days pass. On the 8th day, the priesthood officially begins. Chapter 9, verse 1 says, "On the 8th day, Moses summoned Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel." Moses gives Aaron his first instructions as high priest. Verse 2 records them. He said to Aaron, "Take a bull calf for your sin offering and a ram for your burnt offering, both without defect, and present them before the Lord." Then Moses tells Aaron what to say to the Israelites. Verse 4 adds, "And an ox and a ram for a fellowship offering to sacrifice before the Lord, together with a grain offering mixed with olive oil. For today the Lord will appear to you." That last sentence changes everything. God himself will appear. Moses explains what's about to happen. Verse 6 states, "Then Moses said, 'This is what the Lord has commanded you to do, so that the glory of the Lord may appear to you.'" Aaron begins his work. He approaches the altar and performs each sacrifice according to the regulations. The sin offering, the burnt offering, the grain offering, all done exactly right. Now Aaron turns to the people's offerings. Verse 15 says, "Aaron then brought the offering that was for the people." He handles each one properly. Everything is done. Aaron lifts his hands toward the people and blesses them. Verse 22 says, "Then Aaron lifted his hands toward the people and blessed them. And having sacrificed the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the fellowship offering, he stepped down." Moses and Aaron enter the tabernacle together. When they come out, they bless the people again. And then it happens. Verses 23 and 24 record the moment. Moses and Aaron then went into the tent of meeting. When they came out, they blessed the people, and the glory of the Lord appeared to all the people. Fire came out from the presence of the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the fat portions on the altar. And when all the people saw it, they shouted for joy and fell face down. Fire from heaven. God accepts the worship. The system works. The priesthood is validated. The celebration doesn't last long. Fire from heaven has just consumed the offerings, and the people are still on their faces in awe. But tragedy strikes immediately. Aaron's two oldest sons, Nadab and Abihu, make a fatal decision. Chapter 10, verse 1 records what happens. Aaron's sons Nadab and Abihu took their censers, put fire in them, and added incense, and they offered unauthorized fire before the Lord, contrary to his command. Unauthorized fire. The Hebrew word suggests something foreign, something strange, something God never asked for. The response is instant. Verse 2 says, "So fire came out from the presence of the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord." The same fire that accepted the offerings now executes the priests. They die right there in the sanctuary. Moses speaks to Aaron. Verse 3 records his words. Moses then said to Aaron, "This is what the Lord spoke of when he said, 'Among those who approach me, I will be proved holy. In the sight of all the people, I will be honored.'" Those who come near God bear greater responsibility. Aaron's response is silence. The verse ends with, "Aaron remained silent." What can he say? His sons are dead. But he doesn't argue with God. Moses calls Aaron's cousins to remove the bodies. Verse 4 and 5 say, "Moses summoned Mishael and Elzaphan, sons of Aaron's uncle Uzziel, and said to them, 'Come here, carry your cousins outside the camp, away from the front of the sanctuary.' And so they came and carried them, still in their tunics, outside the camp as Moses ordered. Then Moses gives Aaron and his remaining sons strict instructions. Verse 6 states, "Moses said to Aaron and his sons Eleazar and Ithamar, 'Do not let your hair become unkempt, and do not tear your clothes, or you will die, and the Lord will be angry with the whole community.'" Aaron cannot mourn like other fathers. His role as high priest supersedes his role as father. Then God speaks directly to Aaron for the first time. Verse 8 says, "Then the Lord said to Aaron." Verse 9 contains the command, "You and your sons are not to drink wine or other fermented drink whenever you go into the tent of meeting, or you will die." Verse 10 explains why, so that you can distinguish between the holy and the common, between the unclean and the clean. This is the priest's job, making distinctions. Priests must recognize differences with absolute clarity. Moses then addresses a practical problem. The grain offering still needs to be eaten, but Moses discovers the goat of the sin offering has been burned instead of eaten. Verse 16 says, when Moses inquired about the goat of the sin offering and found that it had been burned up, he was angry with Eleazar and Ithamar. Aaron responds, defending his sons. Verse 19 gives his answer. Aaron replied to Moses, today they sacrifice their sin offering and their burnt offering before the Lord. But such things as this have happened to me. Would the Lord have been pleased if I had eaten the sin offering today? Moses accepts this explanation. Verse 20 simply states, when Moses heard this, he was satisfied. Now God establishes dietary laws that will set Israel apart from every other nation. Verse 2 introduces the topic. Say to the Israelites, of all the animals that live on land, these are the ones you may eat. The criteria for land animals is specific. Verse 3 explains, you may eat any animal that has a divided hoof and that chews the cud. Both conditions must be met. Verses 4 through 7 list animals that fail the test. There are some that only chew the cud or only have a divided hoof, but you must not eat them. The camel, though it chews the cud, does not have a divided hoof. It is ceremonially unclean for you. The hyrax, though it chews the cud, does not have a divided hoof. It is unclean for you. The rabbit, though it chews the cud, does not have a divided hoof. It is unclean for you. And the pig, though it has a divided hoof, does not chew the cud. It is unclean for you. Water creatures have simpler rules. Verse 9 states, of all the creatures living in the water of the seas and the streams, you may eat any that have fins and scales. Fins and scales, that's it. Verse 10 addresses everything else. But all creatures in the seas or streams that do not have fins and scales, whether among all the swarming things or among all the other living creatures in the water, you are to regard as unclean. Birds present a different approach. Instead of giving criteria, God lists specific forbidden birds. Verse 13 begins, these are the birds you are to regard as unclean and not eat because they are unclean. The list includes eagles, vultures, various birds of prey, ravens, owls, seagulls, hawks, storks, herons, and bats. Flying insects are mostly forbidden. Verse 20 says, all flying insects that walk on all fours are to be regarded as unclean by you. But there's an exception. Verse 21 explains, there are, however, some flying insects that walk on all fours that you may eat, those that have jointed legs for hopping on the ground. Small creatures that move along the ground are unclean. Verse 29 and 30 list them. Of the animals that move along the ground, these are unclean for you. The weasel, the rat, any kind of great lizard, the gecko, the monitor lizard, the wall lizard, the skink, and the chameleon. If a dead, unclean animal falls on something, that item becomes unclean. Verse 32 explains, when one of them dies and falls on something, that article, whatever its use, will be unclean, whether it is made of wood, cloth, hide, or sackcloth. Put it in water. It will be unclean till evening, and then it will be clean. The chapter concludes with the reason. Verse 44 and 45 say, I am the Lord your God. Consecrate yourselves and be holy, because I am holy. Do not make yourselves unclean by any creature that moves along the ground. I am the Lord, who brought you up out of Egypt to be your God. Therefore, be holy, because I am holy. Chapter 12 addresses childbirth and explains how it intersects with ceremonial cleanness. Verse 2 begins the instructions. Say to the Israelites, a woman who becomes pregnant and gives birth to a son will be ceremonially unclean for 7 days, just as she is unclean during her monthly period. On the 8th day, something important happens. Verse 3 says, "On the 8th day the boy is to be circumcised." Circumcision marks the baby boy's entrance into the covenant community, but the mother's purification isn't complete yet. Verse 4 explains, "Then the woman must wait 33 days to be purified from her bleeding. She must not touch anything sacred or go to the sanctuary until the days of her purification are over." The timeline changes for daughters. Verse 5 states, "If she gives birth to a daughter, for 2 weeks the woman will be unclean, as during her period. Then she must wait 66 days to be purified from her bleeding." When the purification days are complete, the mother brings offerings. Verse 6 describes them. "When the days of her purification for a son or daughter are over, she is to bring to the priest at the entrance to the tent of meeting a year-old lamb for a burnt offering and a young pigeon or a dove for a sin offering." But not everyone can afford a lamb. Verse 8 states, "But if she cannot afford a lamb, she is to bring 2 doves or 2 young pigeons, one for a burnt offering and the other for a sin offering. In this way the priest will make atonement for her, and she will be clean." Chapter 13 is the longest chapter in Leviticus, and it's all about diagnosis. God turns priests into health inspectors. Verse 2 introduces the situation. When anyone has a swelling or a rash or a shiny spot on their skin that may be a defiling skin disease, they must be brought to Aaron the priest or to one of his sons who is a priest. Verse 3 explains the diagnostic process. The priest is to examine the sore on the skin, and if the hair in the sore has turned white and the sore appears to be more than skin deep, it is a defiling skin disease. When the priest examines that person, he shall pronounce them ceremonially unclean, but not every spot is serious. Verse 4 describes a less certain case. If the shiny spot on the skin is white but does not appear to be more than skin deep, and the hair in it has not turned white, the priest is to isolate the affected person for 7 days. After 7 days, the priest examines again. Verse 5 says, "On the 7th day the priest is to examine them, and if he sees that the sore is unchanged and has not spread in the skin, he is to isolate them for another 7 days." The second examination comes in verse 6. "On the 7th day, the priest is to examine them again, and if the sore has faded and has not spread in the skin, the priest shall pronounce them clean. It is only a rash." Raw flesh in the affected area is a bad sign. Verse 10 describes this. "The priest is to examine them, and if there is a white swelling in the skin that has turned the hair white, and if there is raw flesh in the swelling." Verse 11 states, "It is a chronic skin disease, and the priest shall pronounce them unclean." Sometimes the disease covers the entire body. Verse 12 and 13 address this. "If the disease breaks out all over their skin, and so far as the priest can see, it covers all the skin of the affected person from head to foot, the priest is to examine them, and if the disease has covered their whole body, he shall pronounce them clean. Since it has all turned white, they are clean." Someone diagnosed with a skin disease must take specific actions. Verse 45 and 46 describe the requirements. "Anyone with such a defiling disease must wear torn clothes, let their hair be unkempt, cover the lower part of their face and cry out, 'Unclean, unclean.' As long as they have the disease, they remain unclean. They must live alone. They must live outside the camp." The chapter then shifts to contaminated fabrics. Verse 47 introduces this. "As for any fabric that is spoiled with a defiling mold, any woolen or linen clothing." The priest isolates the item for 7 days, then examines it again. Verse 51 explains, "On the 7th day he is to examine it, and if the mold has spread in the fabric, the woven or knitted material, or the leather, whatever its use, it is a persistent defiling mold. The article is unclean." Chapter 13 explained diagnosis. Chapter 14 explains what happens when someone heals. Verse 2 introduces the procedure. These are the regulations for any diseased person at the time of their ceremonial cleansing when they are brought to the priest. The ceremony requires specific items. Verse 4 lists them. The priest shall order that 2 live clean birds and some cedar wood, scarlet yarn and hyssop be brought for the person to be cleansed. 1 bird dies. Verse 5 explains, then the priest shall order that 1 of the birds be killed over fresh water in a clay pot. The living bird participates in the ritual. Verse 6 describes this. He is then to take the live bird and dip it, together with the cedar wood, the scarlet yarn, and the hyssop, into the blood of the bird that was killed over the fresh water. This mixture is then applied to the person. Verse 7 states, 7 times he shall sprinkle the one to be cleansed of the defiling disease, and then pronounce them clean. After that, he is to release the live bird in the open fields. But the person isn't finished yet. Verse 8 continues, the person to be cleansed must wash their clothes, shave off all their hair, and bathe with water. Then they will be ceremonially clean. After this, they may come into the camp, but they must stay outside their tent for 7 days. The 8th day brings sacrifices. Verse 10 lists what's needed. On the 8th day, they must bring 2 male lambs and 1 ewe lamb a year old, each without defect, along with 3/10 of an ephah of the finest flour mixed with olive oil for a grain offering, and 1 log of oil. Blood from the guilt offering goes on the person being cleansed. Verse 14 describes this carefully. The priest is to take some of the blood of the guilt offering and put it on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of their right hand, and on the big toe of their right foot. But what about poor people who can't afford 3 lambs? Verse 21 addresses this. If, however, they are poor and cannot afford these, they must take 1 male lamb as a guilt offering to be waved to make atonement for them, together with 1/10 of an ephah of the finest flour mixed with olive oil for a grain offering, a log of oil. The chapter then shifts to houses with contamination. Verse 34 introduces the situation. When you enter the land of Canaan, which I am giving you as your possession, and I put a spreading mold in a house in that land. The homeowner must report the problem. Verse 35 states, the owner of the house must go and tell the priest, I have seen something that looks like a defiling mold in my house. The priest looks for specific signs. Verse 37 describes them. He is to examine the mold on the walls, and if it has greenish or reddish depressions that appear to be deeper than the surface of the wall. If the mold returns after repairs, the verdict is final. Verse 45 confirms this. It must be torn down, its stones, timbers, and all the plaster, and taken out of the town to an unclean place. Chapter 15 addresses bodily discharges. Verse 2 introduces the subject. Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when any man has an unusual bodily discharge, such a discharge is unclean. Anything the man touches becomes unclean. Verse 4 states, any bed the man with a discharge lies on will be unclean, and anything he sits on will be unclean. This uncleanness spreads to others. Verse 5 says, anyone who touches his bed must wash their clothes and bathe with water, and they will be unclean till evening. When the discharge stops, a waiting period begins. Verse 13 explains, when a man is cleansed from his discharge, he is to count off 7 days for his ceremonial cleansing. He must wash his clothes and bathe himself with fresh water, and he will be clean. Normal seminal emissions also create temporary uncleanness. Verse 16 addresses this. When a man has an emission of semen, he must bathe his whole body with water, and he will be unclean till evening. Sexual relations create mutual uncleanness. Verse 18 states, when a man has sexual relations with a woman and there is an emission of semen, both of them must bathe with water, and they will be unclean till evening. Women's regular cycles also create uncleanness. Verse 19 explains, when a woman has her regular flow of blood, the impurity of her monthly period will last 7 days, and anyone who touches her will be unclean till evening. Prolonged or irregular bleeding requires different handling. Verse 25 introduces this. When a woman has a discharge of blood for many days at a time other than her monthly period, or has a discharge that continues beyond her period, she will be unclean as long as she has the discharge. The chapter concludes with a warning. Verse 31 states, you must keep the Israelites separate from things that make them unclean, so they will not die in their uncleanness for defiling my dwelling place, which is among them. Chapter 16 describes the most solemn day in Israel's calendar. It begins with a reminder of death. Verse 1 states, the Lord spoke to Moses after the death of the 2 sons of Aaron who died when they approached the Lord. God warns Aaron about entering the most holy place. Verse 2 says, the Lord said to Moses, tell your brother Aaron that he is not to come whenever he chooses into the most holy place behind the curtain in front of the atonement cover on the ark, or else he will die. Special clothing is required. Verse 4 describes it. He is to put on the sacred linen tunic with linen undergarments next to his body. He is to tie the linen sash around him and put on the linen turban. These are sacred garments, so he must bathe himself with water before he puts them on. The community provides additional animals. Verse 5 states, from the Israelite community he is to take 2 male goats for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering. The 2 goats are presented together. Verse 8 continues, he is to cast lots for the 2 goats, 1 lot for the Lord and the other for the scapegoat. Then comes the incense. Verse 12 describes this carefully. He is to take a censer full of burning coals from the altar before the Lord and 2 handfuls of finely ground fragrant incense and take them behind the curtain. Verse 13 explains why. He is to put the incense on the fire before the Lord, and the smoke of the incense will conceal the atonement cover above the tablets of the covenant law, so that he will not die. Blood comes next. Verse 14 states, he is to take some of the bull's blood, and with his finger sprinkle it on the front of the atonement cover. Then he shall sprinkle some of it with his finger 7 times before the atonement cover. Now comes the second goat, the scapegoat. Aaron lays both hands on the goat's head. Verse 21 describes what happens. He is to lay both hands on the head of the live goat and confess over it all the wickedness and rebellion of the Israelites, all their sins, and put them on the goat's head. He shall send the goat away into the wilderness in the care of someone appointed for the task. Verse 22 explains the goat's fate. The goat will carry on itself all their sins to a remote place, and the man shall release it in the wilderness. This day becomes a permanent institution. Verse 29 establishes it. This is to be a lasting ordinance for you. On the 10th day of the 7th month, you must deny yourselves and not do any work. Verse 30 states the reason, because on this day atonement will be made for you, to cleanse you. Then before the Lord you will be clean from all your sins. Chapter 17 focuses on blood. All slaughter must occur at the tabernacle. Verse 3 and 4 explain, any Israelite who sacrifices an ox, a lamb or a goat in the camp or outside of it, instead of bringing it to the entrance to the tent of meeting to present it as an offering to the Lord, that person shall be considered to have shed blood and must be cut off from their people. Eating blood is strictly forbidden. Verse 10 declares, I will set my face against any Israelite or any foreigner residing among them who eats blood, and I will cut them off from the people. Verse 11 explains why, for the life of a creature is in the blood, and I have given it to you to make atonement for yourselves on the altar. It is the blood that makes atonement for one's life. Chapter 18 shifts to sexual ethics. Verse 3 establishes boundaries. You must not do as they do in Egypt, where you used to live, and you must not do as they do in the land of Canaan, where I am bringing you. The forbidden relationships begin in verse 6. No one is to approach any close relative to have sexual relations. I am the Lord. Verse 7 starts the specific list. Do not dishonor your father by having sexual relations with your mother. Multiple verses list forbidden relationships: mothers, stepmothers, sisters, granddaughters, aunts, daughters-in-law, sisters-in-law. Verse 20 forbids adultery. Do not have sexual relations with your neighbor's wife and defile yourself with her. Verse 22 addresses homosexual practice. Do not have sexual relations with a man as one does with a woman. That is detestable. Verse 23 prohibits bestiality. Do not have sexual relations with an animal and defile yourself with it. Verse 24 warns about consequences. Do not defile yourselves in any of these ways, because this is how the nations that I am going to drive out before you became defiled. The chapter ends with a command. Verse 30 states, keep my requirements and do not follow any of the detestable customs that were practiced before you came, and do not defile yourselves with them. I am the Lord your God. Chapter 19 moves from ritual purity to practical holiness. God speaks to Moses in verse 1, and verse 2 contains a sweeping command. Speak to the entire assembly of Israel and say to them, be holy, because I, the Lord your God, am holy. This isn't just for priests, it's for everyone. Holiness starts at home. Verse 3 begins, each of you must respect your mother and father, and you must observe my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God. Family relationships and Sabbath observance form the foundation. Harvesting has built-in generosity. Verse 9 states, when you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Leave something behind. Verse 10 continues, do not go over your vineyard a second time, or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am the Lord your God. Basic ethics follow. Verse 11 lists several. Do not steal, do not lie, do not deceive one another. Workers deserve fair treatment. Verse 13 says, do not defraud or rob your neighbor. Do not hold back the wages of a hired worker overnight. Vulnerable people need protection. Verse 14 commands, do not curse the deaf or put a stumbling block in front of the blind, but fear your God. I am the Lord. Justice must be impartial. Verse 15 states, do not pervert justice, do not show partiality to the poor or favoritism to the great, but judge your neighbor fairly. Gossip destroys community. Verse 16 warns, do not go about spreading slander among your people. Do not do anything that endangers your neighbor's life. I am the Lord. Hidden hatred is forbidden. Verse 17 says, do not hate a fellow Israelite in your heart. Rebuke your neighbor frankly, so you will not share in their guilt. Revenge has no place here. Verse 18 contains one of the most famous verses, do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Fruit trees need time to mature. Verse 23 explains, when you enter the land and plant any kind of fruit tree, regard its fruit as forbidden. For 3 years you are to consider it forbidden. It must not be eaten. Wait 3 years. Verse 25 concludes, but in the 5th year you may eat its fruit. In this way your harvest will be increased. I am the Lord your God. Elderly people deserve respect. Verse 32 commands, stand up in the presence of the aged, show respect for the elderly, and revere your God. I am the Lord. Foreigners must be treated fairly. Verse 33 and 34 state, when a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native-born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Business must be honest. Verse 35 and 36 say, do not use dishonest standards when measuring length, weight, or quantity. Use honest scales and honest weights, an honest ephah and an honest hin. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt. Deity chapter 19 gave commands. Chapter 20 explains what happens when people break them. Verse 2 starts with the most serious offense. Say to the Israelites, any Israelite or any foreigner residing in Israel who sacrifices any of his children to Moloch is to be put to death. The members of the community are to stone him. If the community ignores it, God holds them responsible. Verse 4 and 5 warn, if the members of the community close their eyes when that man sacrifices one of his children to Molech, and if they fail to put him to death, I myself will set my face against him and his family. Cursing parents brings death. Verse 9 declares, anyone who curses their father or mother is to be put to death. Because they have cursed their father or mother, their blood will be on their own head. Adultery carries severe penalty. Verse 10 states, if a man commits adultery with another man's wife, with the wife of his neighbor, both the adulterer and the adulteress are to be put to death. Various sexual violations receive death penalties. Verse 11 addresses relations with a stepmother. Verse 12 addresses a daughter-in-law. Verse 13 addresses homosexual acts. Each brings the same consequence, death. Devoted things are treated seriously. Verse 22 and 23 plead, keep all my decrees and laws and follow them, so that the land where I am bringing you to live will not vomit you out. You must not live according to the customs of the nations I am going to drive out before you. Verse 26 summarizes, you are to be holy to me because I, the Lord, am holy, and I have set you apart from the nations to be my own. Priests face additional restrictions. Chapter 21, verse 1 begins, the Lord said to Moses, speak to the priests, the sons of Aaron, and say to them, a priest must not make himself ceremonially unclean for any of his people who die. But exceptions exist. Verse 2 and 3 explain, except for a close relative, such as his mother or father, his son or daughter, his brother, or an unmarried sister. Verse 6 explains why they must be holy to their God and must not profane the name of their God. Because they present the food offerings to the Lord, the food of their God, they are to be holy. Marriage restrictions apply. Verse 7 says they must not marry women defiled by prostitution or divorced from their husbands, because priests are holy to their God. The high priest has even stricter rules. Verse 10 introduces this. The high priest, the one among his brothers who has had the anointing oil poured on his head and who has been ordained to wear the priestly garments, must not let his hair become unkempt or tear his clothes. Verse 11 states, he must not enter a place where there is a dead body. He must not make himself unclean, even for his father or mother. Physical defects disqualify priests from offering sacrifices. Verse 17 continues, say to Aaron, for the generations to come, none of your descendants who has a defect may come near to offer the food of his God. Verse 18 through 20 list disqualifying conditions. No man who has any defect may come near. No man who is blind or lame, disfigured or deformed. No man with a crippled foot or hand, or who is a hunchback or a dwarf. But these men aren't excluded from everything. Verse 22 clarifies, he may eat the most holy food of his God as well as the holy food. Chapter 22 continues with regulations. Verse 2 states, tell Aaron and his sons to treat with respect the sacred offerings the Israelites consecrate to me, so they will not profane my holy name. Sacrificial animals must be perfect. Verse 19 continues, you must present a male without defect from the cattle, sheep, or goats in order that it may be accepted on your behalf. Verse 20 prohibits defective animals. Do not bring anything with a defect, because it will not be accepted on your behalf. Newborn animals need time. Verse 27 states, when a calf, a lamb, or a goat is born, it is to remain with its mother for 7 days. From the 8th day on, it will be acceptable as a food offering presented to the Lord. Chapter 23 establishes Israel's yearly rhythm. Verse 2 introduces the concept, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, these are my appointed festivals, the appointed festivals of the Lord, which you are to proclaim as sacred assemblies." The Sabbath begins the list. Verse 3 states, "There are 6 days when you may work, but the 7th day is a day of Sabbath rest." Passover comes first in the yearly cycle. Verse 5 explains, "The Lord's Passover begins at twilight on the 14th day of the first month." The festival of unleavened bread follows. Verse 6 says, "On the 15th day of that month, the Lord's festival of unleavened bread begins. For 7 days you must eat bread made without yeast." First fruits marks the harvest's beginning. Verse 10 explains, "When you enter the land I am going to give you and you reap its harvest, bring to the priest a sheaf of the first grain you harvest." The Festival of Weeks comes 50 days later. Verse 15 explains the count. "From the day after the Sabbath, the day you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, count off 7 full weeks." The 7th month brings transformation. Verse 24 introduces the Festival of Trumpets. "On the first day of the 7th month you are to have a day of Sabbath rest, a sacred assembly commemorated with trumpet blasts." The Day of Atonement comes 10 days later. Verse 27 explains, "The 10th day of this 7th month is the Day of Atonement. Hold a sacred assembly and deny yourselves." The Festival of Tabernacles begins 5 days later. Verse 34 introduces it. "On the 15th day of the 7th month, the Lord's Festival of Tabernacles begins, and it lasts for 7 days. Verse 42 explains the practice. "Live in temporary shelters for 7 days. All native-born Israelites are to live in such shelters." Verse 43 gives the reason, "So your descendants will know that I had the Israelites live in temporary shelters when I brought them out of Egypt." Chapter 24 addresses tabernacle maintenance. Verse 2 commands, "Command the Israelites to bring you clear oil of pressed olives for the light, so that the lamps may be kept burning continually." The bread of the presence also requires attention. Verse 5 instructs, "Take the finest flour and bake 12 loaves of bread, using 2/10 of an ephah for each loaf." Then comes trouble. Verse 10 introduces a problematic figure. "Now the son of an Israelite mother and an Egyptian father went out among the Israelites, and a fight broke out in the camp." Verse 11 records the crime. "The son of the Israelite woman blasphemed the name with a curse, so they brought him to Moses." God responds with instructions. Verse 14 gives the procedure. "Take the blasphemer outside the camp. All those who heard him are to lay their hands on his head, and the entire assembly is to stone him." This leads to broader justice principles. Verse 17 states, "Anyone who takes the life of a human being is to be put to death." Personal injury demands equivalent justice. Verse 19 and 20 explain, "Anyone who injures their neighbor is to be injured in the same manner. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth." Verse 22 emphasizes equal application. "You are to have the same law for the foreigner and the native-born. I am the Lord your God." Chapter 25 introduces radical economic principles. Verse 2 begins, "When you enter the land I am going to give you, the land itself must observe a Sabbath to the Lord." Verse 4 explains, "But in the 7th year, the land is to have a year of Sabbath rest, a Sabbath to the Lord. Do not sow your fields or prune your vineyards. After 7 cycles comes something bigger." Verse 8 explains, "Count off 7 Sabbath years, 7 times 7 years, so that the 7 Sabbath years amount to a period of 49 years. Verse 10 names it, "Consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. Each of you is to return to your family property and to your own clan." Property returns to original owners. Verse 13 states, "In this year of jubilee, everyone is to return to their own property. Land cannot be sold permanently." Verse 23 declares, "The land must not be sold permanently, because the land is mine, and you reside in my land as foreigners and strangers." Fellow Israelites in poverty need help. Verse 35 commands, "If any of your fellow Israelites become poor and are unable to support themselves among you, help them as you would a foreigner and stranger." Israelites cannot be permanent slaves. Verse 39 and 40 state, "If any of your fellow Israelites become poor and sell themselves to you, do not make them work as slaves. They are to be treated as hired workers or temporary residents among you." Verse 42 explains why. "Because the Israelites are my servants, whom I brought out of Egypt, they must not be sold as slaves." Chapter 26 presents Israel's future. Verse 3 begins the conditional promise, "If you follow my decrees and are careful to obey my commands." Verse 4 promises rain. "I will send you rain in its season, and the ground will yield its crops, and the trees their fruit." And verse 6 promises peace. "I will grant peace in the land, and you will lie down and no one will make you afraid." But the greatest blessing transcends material prosperity. Verse 11 and 12 declare, "I will put my dwelling place among you, and I will not abhor you. I will walk among you and be your God, and you will be my people." Now come the consequences of disobedience. Verse 14 and 15 introduce them. "But if you will not listen to me and carry out all these commands," at verse 16 begins the curse list. "Then I will do this to you. I will bring on you sudden terror, wasting diseases and fever." If this doesn't work, God escalates. Verse 18 warns, "If after all this you will not listen to me, I will punish you for your sins 7 times over." The punishments continue escalating through multiple stages, each worse than the last, until verse 33 promises, "I will scatter you among the nations, and will draw out my sword and pursue you." But even here, hope exists. Verse 40 through 42 offer restoration. "But if they will confess their sins and the sins of their ancestors, their unfaithfulness and their hostility toward me, which made me hostile toward them, so that I sent them into the land of their enemies, then when their uncircumcised hearts are humbled and they pay for their sin, I will remember my covenant with Jacob and my covenant with Isaac and my covenant with Abraham." The final chapter addresses voluntary dedications. Verse 2 introduces the topic, "If anyone makes a special vow to dedicate a person to the Lord by giving the equivalent value." Age and gender affect valuation. Verse 3 through 7 give the scale based on age groups and gender, with values ranging from 3 shekels for young girls to 50 shekels for adult men. Poverty requires flexibility. Verse 8 states, "If anyone making the vow is too poor to pay the specified amount, the person being dedicated is to be presented to the priest, who will set the value according to what the one making the vow can afford." Animals follow different rules. Verse 9 explains, "If what they vowed is an animal that is acceptable as an offering to the Lord, such an animal given to the Lord becomes holy." Houses can be dedicated. Verse 14 explains, "If anyone dedicates their house as something holy to the Lord, the priest will judge its quality as good or bad." Field dedication is more complex, with timing and jubilee years affecting valuation. Firstborn animals already belong to God. Verse 26 states, "No one, however, may dedicate the firstborn of an animal, since the firstborn already belongs to the Lord. Tithes belong to God." Verse 30 states, "A tithe of everything from the land, whether grain from the soil or fruit from the trees, belongs to the Lord. It is holy to the Lord." The book ends with authentication. Verse 34 concludes, "These are the commands the Lord gave Moses at Mount Sinai for the Israelites." If this journey through Leviticus opened your eyes to something you'd never seen before, do 2 things. First, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next book in this series. Second, Share this video with someone who thinks the Old Testament is just boring laws. Show them there's a story here, a story of a God who pursues his people, who makes a way when there seems to be no way, and who transforms ordinary moments into encounters with the divine. Leviticus isn't the end. It's the beginning of understanding how a holy God dwells with unholy people. And that changes everything.